The morning started like any other for Elena. She woke up at 6, made herself a cup of instant coffee, and caught the early bus to work. The ride took 40 minutes, but she never complained. She had done this same routine for 3 years now, ever since she got the job as a receptionist at one of the biggest law firms in Chicago. The firm was called Hargrove and Associates. It sat on the 23rd floor of a glass building downtown, the kind of place where everything smelled like expensive cologne and fresh printer paper. Elena was always the first one there. She liked arriving early, turning on the lights, and setting up the front desk before anyone else walked in. Her job was simple. She answered phones, greeted clients, scheduled meetings, and made sure the coffee machine in the break room never ran empty. It was not glamorous work, but it paid the bills. And for someone like Elena, that was enough. She was 32 years old, lived alone in a small studio apartment, and had no family left in the city except for her aging mother, who lived in a nursing home on the south side. Every Sunday, Elena would visit her. They would sit together, sometimes talking, sometimes just holding hands in silence. Her mother's memory was fading, but on good days, she would look at Elena and smile like she remembered everything. At work, Elena kept to herself. She was polite to everyone, always said good morning, always held the door open for people rushing past her. But no one really noticed her. To the lawyers and paralegals who worked there, she was just the girl at the front desk. They walked past her every day without a second glance, and honestly, Elena was fine with that. She had learned a long time ago that being invisible had its advantages. No drama, no problems, just do your job and go home. But that Wednesday afternoon, everything changed. It was around 3 o'clock when her desk phone rang. The voice on the other end belonged to Mr. Hargrove's assistant, a sharp woman named Linda who rarely smiled. "Elena, Mr. Hargrove would like to see you in his office." Elena felt her stomach tighten. In 3 years, she had never been called into his office. Not once. She had seen him plenty of times, of course. He was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and suits that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He was polite enough when he passed by her desk, always giving her a small nod. But they had never actually spoken. She stood up slowly, smoothed down her blouse, and walked toward the corner office at the end of the hallway. Her heart was beating faster than it should have been. She told herself it was nothing. Maybe he just wanted to ask her something. Maybe there was a scheduling issue. But deep down, she had a bad feeling. When she reached his door, she knocked twice. A voice from inside told her to come in. Mr. Hargrove was sitting behind his massive oak desk. He looked tired, like he had not slept well in days. Linda stood beside him, holding a folder. Neither of them smiled. "Please, sit down," Mr. Hargrove said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Elena sat. Her hands were trembling slightly, so she placed them on her lap to keep them still. For a long moment, no one said anything. Mr. Hargrove just looked at her, almost like he was trying to find the right words. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh. "Elena, I am going to be honest with you. This is not easy for me to say." She felt her throat go dry. "The firm has been going through some financial difficulties lately," he continued. "We have lost a few major clients this year, and the partners have decided that we need to make some cuts. Unfortunately, your position is one of the ones being eliminated." The words hit her like a punch to the chest. She blinked a few times, trying to process what he had just said. "I want you to know that this has nothing to do with your performance," Mr. Hargrove added quickly. "You have been a reliable employee, but we simply cannot afford to keep the position right now." Elena opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. What could she say? She had no power here, no leverage. She was just a receptionist. Linda stepped forward and placed the folder on the desk. "This contains your final paycheck and some paperwork you will need to sign. You will also receive 2 weeks of severance pay." 2 weeks. After 3 years. That was all she was worth to them. Elena nodded slowly. She did not trust herself to speak without her voice breaking, so she just took the folder and stood up. "I am sorry." "Elena," Mr. Hargrove said. He sounded sincere, but it did not matter. Sorry did not pay rent. Sorry did not buy groceries. She walked out of his office in a daze. The hallway seemed longer than before, the lights a little too bright. When she reached her desk, she stood there for a moment, staring at the small collection of things she had accumulated over the years. A coffee mug with a faded sunflower on it. A little cactus plant she had bought at a dollar store. A photo of her mother from 10 years ago. Back when she still remembered Elena's name. She found an empty cardboard box in the supply closet and began packing her things. Her hands moved mechanically, like they belonged to someone else. That was when she heard the laughter. It came from the break room, just a few feet away. The door was open, and she could see a group of young associates standing around the coffee machine. There were 4 of them, all in their late 20s, all wearing expensive watches and perfectly pressed shirts. They were the golden boys of the firm, the ones everyone said would make partner someday. One of them, a guy named Derek, was talking louder than the others. He had slicked back hair and a smile that always seemed a little too confident. "Did you hear? They finally let go of the receptionist," he said, not even bothering to lower his voice. Guess answering phones was not exactly a skill worth keeping around. The others laughed. One of them glanced toward Elena's desk, saw her standing there with the box in her hands, and quickly looked away. But he did not say anything. None of them did. Derek kept going. "I mean, come on. What did she even do all day? Smile and transfer calls? My 10-year-old cousin could do that job." More laughter. Elena felt her face grow hot. Her eyes started to sting, but she refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of them. She picked up her box, tucked it under her arm, and walked toward the elevator. She kept her head down, her eyes fixed on the floor. She could feel them watching her, could hear their whispers following her like shadows. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside. Only when the doors closed behind her did she finally let out the breath she had been holding. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished metal walls. She looked small, tired, defeated. The elevator began its descent, and with every floor that passed, Elena felt herself sinking lower too. 3 years. 3 years of showing up early, staying late, doing everything right, and this was how it ended, with budget cuts and cruel jokes and a cardboard box full of things that did not matter. When she stepped out onto the street, the cold Chicago wind hit her face. It was late October, and the sky was already turning gray. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, not sure where to go. Home felt too empty. Her mother would not understand what had happened, and she had no friends to call, no one to talk to. So she just started walking. She did not know where she was going. She did not care. She just needed to move, to feel something other than the heaviness sitting on her chest. The city moved around her like she was not even there. People rushed past, talking on their phones, clutching their coffee cups, living their busy lives. No one looked at her. No one noticed the woman with the cardboard box and the tears running silently down her cheeks. She was invisible, just like she had always been. But somewhere deep inside her, buried under years of silence and sacrifice, there was something else. Something that had been waiting a very long time to be heard. She just did not know it yet. Elena walked for hours that day. She did not stop until her feet started to ache and the sun began to set behind the tall buildings. By the time she finally made it back to her apartment, it was already dark outside. She set the cardboard box on the kitchen counter and just stood there, staring at it. The faded coffee mug, the little cactus, the photo of her mother. That was all she had to show for 3 years of her life. She did not eat dinner that night. She was not hungry. Instead, she sat on the edge of her bed and looked around her tiny studio apartment. The walls were bare, except for one thing, a single framed photograph hanging near the window. It was a picture of a young girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, sitting at a piano. Her fingers were resting on the keys, and she was smiling like she had just discovered the most wonderful secret in the world. That girl was Elena. She had not looked at that photo in a long time. Most days, she tried not to think about it at all. But tonight, she could not help herself. She walked over to the window and took the frame down from the wall. Her fingers traced the edges of the glass as the memories came flooding back. Elena grew up in Pilsen, a neighborhood on the southwest side of Chicago. It was not a wealthy area, but it was home. She lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment with her mother and father. Her mother cleaned houses for a living, sometimes working 3 or 4 jobs a week just to make ends meet. Her father worked at a factory until his back gave out when Elena was 10. They did not have much, but they had love. And they had music. Elena's mother had always believed that music was a gift from God. She could not play any instrument herself, but she loved to listen. Every Sunday, she would turn on the old radio in the kitchen and hum along to classical stations while she cooked. One day, when Elena was 6 years old, her mother took her to a church down the street. There was a woman there who gave piano lessons for almost nothing, just a few dollars a session. Elena's mother had saved up for weeks just to afford the first month. The moment Elena sat down at that piano, something changed inside her. It was like the instrument was speaking to her in a language she already understood. Her small fingers found the keys like they had been searching for them her whole life. Within a year, her teacher told her mother something she would never forget. "This child is special. I have been teaching for 30 years, and I have never seen anyone learn this fast. She has a gift." Her mother cried that night. Not from sadness, but from hope. She started working extra shifts, taking on more cleaning jobs, doing whatever she could to pay for better lessons. She found a real piano teacher, a retired professor who lived on the north side. He agreed to teach Elena at a discounted rate because he saw what everyone else saw. She was a prodigy. By the time Elena was 12, she was playing pieces that most adults could not master: Chopin, Beethoven, Debussy. Her fingers danced across the keys like they had a mind of their own. She performed at school recitals, local competitions, and even a few concerts at small venues around the city. People started talking about her future. They said she could go to a conservatory, study with the best teachers in the world, maybe even perform at the greatest concert halls. For a few beautiful years, Elena believed that too. But life does not always follow the path we imagine. When Elena was 15, her father got sick. It started with headaches, then dizziness, then something much worse. The doctors ran tests for months before they finally gave them the news. He had a tumor. It was not the kind that could be easily removed. The medical bills piled up fast. Her mother worked herself to exhaustion, but it was never enough. They sold the car. They moved to a smaller apartment. They borrowed money from relatives who did not have much to give. Elena watched her father fade away slowly, day by day. He tried to stay strong for her, always smiling when she came into his room, always asking her to play something for him. She would sit at the old keyboard they had bought years ago and play his favorite pieces while he closed his eyes and listened. He passed away 3 weeks after her 17th birthday. After that, everything fell apart. Her mother could not afford the piano lessons anymore. The conservatory Elena had been accepted to required tuition they did not have. Scholarships were available, but not enough to cover everything, and someone needed to work. Someone needed to help pay the rent. So Elena made a choice. She dropped out of school. She got a job at a grocery store, then a retail shop, then eventually the receptionist position at the law firm. The music stopped. The dream died, and the girl who once made audiences cry with her playing became just another face in the crowd. She told herself it was the right thing to do. Her mother needed her. There was no other option. But deep down, a part of her never stopped grieving for the life she had lost. Now, sitting alone in her apartment at 32 years old, Elena felt that grief more strongly than ever. She had given up everything. And for what? To be fired and laughed at by people who did not even know her name? She put the photograph back on the wall and lay down on her bed. Sleep came slowly that night. And when it did, she dreamed of piano keys. The next few days were hard. Elena applied for jobs online, sent out resumes, made phone calls. But nothing came through. The rejection emails piled up in her inbox like fallen leaves. On the 5th day, She could not stand being inside anymore. She grabbed her coat and went for a walk, just to clear her head. She did not have a destination in mind. She just wandered through the streets, past coffee shops and bookstores and people who all seemed to have somewhere important to be. Eventually, she found herself in a part of the city she did not recognize. There was a small building on the corner, old and a little run down. A sign above the door read, Westbrook Community Center. Through the window, she could see a large room with folding chairs, a few tables, and some kids playing in the corner. And there, sitting against the far wall, was an old upright piano. Elena stopped walking. She stood on the sidewalk, staring at that piano like it was a ghost from another life. It looked worn and dusty, like no one had touched it in years, but something about it called to her. Before she knew what she was doing, she pushed open the door and walked inside. The room smelled like old books and floor cleaner. A woman at the front desk looked up and smiled. "Can I help you?" Elena hesitated. She did not know what to say. She was not even sure why she had come in. I saw the piano," she said quietly. "Is it okay if I mean, does anyone use it?" The woman shook her head. "Not really. It has been sitting there for years. You are welcome to play if you want." Elena thanked her and walked slowly across the room. Her heart was pounding. She had not touched a real piano in over a decade. She did not even know if she still remembered how. She sat down on the bench. The wood creaked slightly under her weight. She looked at the keys, yellowed with age. Some of them chipped at the edges, and then, very slowly, she placed her fingers on them. The first note rang out, soft and clear. Then another. And another. Her hands remembered everything. She began to play. It was a piece by Chopin, one she had learned when she was just a child. The notes flowed out of her like water from a broken dam. Filling the room with sound, she closed her eyes and let the music take over. For the first time in 15 years, Elena felt like herself again. She did not notice the tears running down her face. She did not notice the people in the room who had stopped what they were doing to listen. She did not notice the old man sitting quietly in the corner, watching her with wide eyes. All she knew was the music, and for those few precious minutes, that was enough. Elena went back to the community center the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. Every afternoon, she would walk through those old doors, sit down at the worn piano, and play until her fingers ached. It became her routine, her escape, the only thing that made sense in a world that had knocked her down so hard. The staff at the center got used to seeing her. The woman at the front desk would smile and wave her in without asking questions. The kids who came for after-school programs would sometimes stop their games to listen. A few of the elderly regulars who gathered for bingo nights started showing up early just to hear her play. But there was one man who came every single day. He was old, maybe in his late 70s, with a thin frame and white hair that stuck up in all directions. He always wore the same brown cardigan and a pair of glasses that seemed too big for his face. He never said anything. He would just sit in a folding chair near the back of the room, close his eyes, and listen. Elena noticed him, of course. It was hard not to. But she never spoke to him. She was too lost in her own world, too focused on the music that poured out of her like something that had been locked away for far too long. She played everything she could remember. Chopin, Debussy, Beethoven, Rachmaninoff. Some pieces came back to her easily, like old friends she had never really forgotten. Others took more time. Her fingers, stumbling over notes she had not touched in 15 years. But slowly, day by day, it all started to come back. And with the music came the memories. She remembered her first recital, when she was 8 years old. Her hands had been shaking so badly she thought she would mess up every note. But the moment she started playing, the fear disappeared. She remembered the look on her mother's face afterward, tears streaming down her cheeks, pride glowing in her eyes. She remembered her father, sitting in his chair by the window, asking her to play just one more song before bed. She remembered the way he used to close his eyes and tap his foot along to the rhythm, even when he was too weak to get out of bed. She remembered the day she told her piano teacher she had to stop. The old professor had looked at her with such sadness, like he was watching something beautiful being destroyed. He had tried to talk her out of it, offered to teach her for free, promised to help her find scholarships. But Elena knew there was no other way. Her mother needed her. The bills were not going to pay themselves, so she walked away from the only thing she had ever truly loved. Now, all these years later, she was finally letting herself feel it again. One evening, after she finished playing a particularly difficult piece by Liszt, she heard something she did not expect. Applause. She turned around and saw the old man in the brown cardigan standing up from his chair. He was clapping slowly, his eyes wet with tears. Elena did not know what to say. She just sat there, frozen, her hands still resting on the keys. The man walked toward her, his steps slow but steady. When he reached the piano, he stopped and looked at her for a long moment. "That was beautiful," he said. His voice was soft and warm, like someone who had spent a lifetime listening to music. "I have heard a lot of pianists in my life. But you have something special." Elena felt her cheeks flush. She was not used to compliments. She was not used to anyone paying attention to her at all. "Thank you," she said quietly. I am out of practice." The old man shook his head. "No. What you have cannot be taught. It cannot be practiced into existence. It is a gift." He pulled up a chair and sat down beside her. "My name is George," he said. "I used to teach music at the university. Many years ago. I have been coming here for the past 2 weeks just to listen to you play." Elena blinked. 2 weeks? She had not realized he had been watching her for that long. "Why?" she asked. George smiled. "Because I know talent when I see it. And I know pain when I hear it." He paused, his eyes searching her face. "Your music. It tells a story. I can hear the sadness in it. But I can also hear the hope. That is what makes it so powerful." Elena looked down at her hands. She did not know how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. George leaned forward slightly. "Can I ask you something? Why did you stop playing?" "Love." George leaned forward. The question hit her harder than she expected. She opened her mouth, but the words got stuck in her throat. How could she explain everything she had been through? The sacrifices, the losses, the years of silence? "Life got in the way," she finally said. It was the simplest answer she could give. George nodded slowly, like he understood more than she was saying. "Life has a way of doing that," he said. "But sometimes, it also has a way of giving us second chances." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to her. "There is an event next month," he said. "A charity gala at the Chicago Cultural Center. Very fancy. Lots of important people. They are looking for a pianist to perform." Elena unfolded the paper and looked at it. It was a flyer for the event. Her eyes scanned the page until they landed on something that made her stomach drop. Sponsored by Hargrove and Associates, her old law firm, the place that had fired her. The people who had laughed at her as she walked out the door. She shook her head and tried to hand the paper back. "I cannot do this." "Why not?" "Because..." She struggled to find the words. "Because those people, they do not think I am worth anything. They let me go like I was nothing, and now you want me to perform for them?" George did not take the paper back. He just looked at her with calm, steady eyes. "I already submitted your name," he said. Elena stared at him. "You what?" "I sent them a recording I made on my phone. One of your performances from last week. They called me back the same day. They want you." Grebe. Grebe. Elena felt the room start to spin. This was too much. Too fast. She had spent the last 15 years hiding from the world, convincing herself that her dreams were dead, and now this stranger was asking her to stand on a stage in front of the very people who had humiliated her? "I cannot," she whispered. "I am not ready." George reached out and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. His touch was light, almost fatherly. "Elena," he said softly, "I have lived a long time. And if there is one thing I have learned, it is this. Life does not wait for us to be ready. It gives us moments, and we either take them or we let them pass. This is your moment." She looked into his eyes and saw something there. Not pity, not pressure, just belief. Pure, simple belief. "You have spent years being invisible," George continued. "Years letting other people decide what you are worth. But I have seen what you can do. I have heard it. And I am telling you, the world deserves to hear it too." Elena felt the tears building behind her eyes. She wanted to say no. She wanted to run away, to go back to her small apartment and her quiet life, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But somewhere deep inside her, a tiny voice was whispering something else. What if he is right? What if this is your chance? She looked down at the flyer in her hands. The date was circled in red. November 15th. 4 weeks away. 4 weeks to prepare. 4 weeks to face her fears. 4 weeks to prove to everyone, including herself, that she was more than just a receptionist who got fired. She took a deep breath and looked back at George. "Okay," she said. Her voice was shaking, but the word was clear. "I will do it." George smiled, and for the first time in a very long time, Elena felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The 4 weeks passed faster than Elena expected. Every day, she woke up early and went straight to the community center. She practiced for hours, sometimes forgetting to eat, sometimes staying so late that the staff had to remind her they were closing. Her fingers moved across the keys until they were sore, until the calluses came back, until the music flowed out of her like it had never stopped. George came to watch her almost every day. He never interrupted. He just sat in his chair, listened, and sometimes offered quiet suggestions when she finished. He helped her choose the piece she would perform. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. It was one of the most difficult and emotionally powerful works ever written for piano. It was also the piece she had been learning when she was forced to quit all those years ago. "This is the one," George had said when she played it for him the first time. "This is the piece that will show them who you really are." Elena was not so sure. The concerto was long, demanding, and required the kind of emotional depth that left performers completely drained. But George believed in her, and slowly, she started to believe in herself too. The night before the gala, Elena could not sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with fears. What if she forgot the notes? What if her hands started shaking? What if she walked out on that stage and froze in front of everyone? And then there was the other fear, the one she did not like to talk about. What if she saw them? What if Derek was there, with his smug smile and his cruel jokes? What if Mr. Hargrove looked at her and saw nothing but the receptionist he had thrown away? She closed her eyes and tried to breathe. She thought about her mother. She thought about her father. She thought about the little girl in the photograph, the one who had fallen in love with the piano before she even understood what love was. That girl had never been afraid. That girl had played with her whole heart, without worrying about what anyone thought. Elena wanted to be that girl again. The next evening, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. She had found a simple black dress at a thrift store. Elegant but not flashy. Her hair was pinned back, and she wore the only pair of earrings she owned, small silver studs her mother had given her years ago. She looked at herself for a long time. Then she took a deep breath and walked out the door. The Chicago Cultural Center was even more beautiful than she had imagined. The building was old and grand, with tall columns and marble floors that echoed with every step. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft golden light across the room. Everywhere she looked, there were people in expensive suits and glittering gowns, holding champagne glasses and laughing like they owned the world. Elena felt completely out of place. She made her way through the crowd, keeping her head down, trying not to bump into anyone. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She found a quiet corner near the back of the room and stood there, watching, waiting, and then she saw them. Derek was standing near the bar, surrounded by the same group of young associates who had laughed at her that day. He looked exactly the same. Same slicked back hair. Same confident smile. Same expensive watch on his wrist. A few feet away, she spotted Mr. Hargrove talking to a group of donors. He was nodding politely, shaking hands, playing the role of the gracious host. Elena felt her stomach twist into knots. For a moment, she wanted to run. She wanted to slip out the door and disappear into the night, to go back to her small apartment and forget any of this had ever happened. But then she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned and saw George standing beside her. He was wearing an old suit that looked like it had not been worn in years, but his eyes were bright and full of warmth. "You came," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course I came," he replied. "I would not miss this for anything." He looked at her for a moment, then gently squeezed her shoulder. "Are you ready?" Elena shook her head. "No, I am terrified." George smiled. "Good, that means you care. Now go out there and show them what you are made of." A few minutes later, the host stepped up to the microphone and asked for everyone's attention. The room grew quiet as he announced the evening's musical performance. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special treat for you tonight. Please welcome to the stage, Miss Elena Reyes." There was polite applause as Elena walked toward the grand piano at the center of the room. Her legs felt like they were made of water. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, watching, judging, waiting. She passed by the group from her old firm. Derek glanced at her, and for a second, his face twisted in confusion. Then recognition hit him. He nudged the person next to him and whispered something. She heard a few quiet laughs. Elena kept walking. She reached the piano and sat down on the bench. The instrument was beautiful. A full concert, grand, with keys that gleamed under the lights. She placed her hands on them and felt the cool ivory beneath her fingertips. The room was silent. She closed her eyes. For a moment, she was not in a ballroom full of strangers. She was back in her old apartment, sitting next to her father, playing for him one last time. She could almost feel his hand on her shoulder, hear his voice whispering in her ear. "Play from your heart, Mija. That is all that matters." She pressed the first key. The note rang out, soft and haunting, filling the room like a whisper. Then came another. And another. The opening of Rachmaninoff's concerto was slow, almost hesitant, like someone waking up from a long dream. But then the music began to build. Elena's fingers moved faster, dancing across the keys with a grace and power she had almost forgotten she possessed. The melody swelled, rising and falling like waves crashing against the shore. Every note was filled with emotion, with years of pain and longing and hope. The room disappeared. The people disappeared. There was nothing left but the music. She played the second movement, the one that always made her cry. It was tender, achingly beautiful, full of a sadness that words could never capture. Her hands trembled, but they did not stop. They could not stop. Then came the third movement. Faster now, more urgent, building toward a climax that demanded everything she had. Her fingers flew across the keys, hitting every note with perfect precision. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her arms ached, but she kept playing. And then, finally, the last chord. She struck it with all the strength she had left, and the sound exploded through the room like thunder. It hung in the air for what felt like an eternity, vibrating, alive. Then silence. Elena sat there, breathing hard, her hands still resting on the keys. She was afraid to open her eyes, afraid to see the faces staring back at her, afraid that it had not been enough. But then she heard it. Applause. It started slowly at first, just a few claps from somewhere in the back. But then it grew. Louder. Faster. More people joining in, until the entire room was on their feet, clapping, cheering, some of them wiping tears from their eyes. Elena opened her eyes and saw something she had never expected. Derek was standing near the bar, his face pale, his mouth slightly open. He was not laughing anymore. Mr. Hargrove was staring at her with an expression she could not quite read. It looked almost like regret, and George, her dear friend George, was standing in the back of the room with tears streaming down his face, clapping harder than anyone. Elena felt the tears spilling down her own cheeks. But for the first time in a very long time, they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of joy. She had done it. After everything she had been through, after all the years of silence and sacrifice and pain, she had finally let the world hear her voice. And the world had listened. The applause seemed to last forever. Elena stood up from the piano bench on shaky legs, her whole body trembling from the emotion of what she had just done. People were still clapping, still cheering, some of them calling out for more. She gave a small bow, not sure what else to do, and then walked off to the side of the room. Her heart was racing. Her hands were still tingling from the keys. She felt like she was floating, like none of this was real. George was the first to reach her. He wrapped his arms around her in a tight hug, something he had never done before. When he pulled back, his eyes were red and wet. "I knew it," he said, his voice cracking. "I knew you had it in you." Elena could not speak. She just nodded, tears still streaming down her face. For the next hour, people came up to her one after another. Strangers shook her hand and told her how moved they were. Women in expensive dresses dabbed at their eyes and asked where she had trained. Men in suits handed her business cards and told her to call them. It was overwhelming, like being caught in a wave she could not control. And then, through the crowd, she saw him. Mr. Hargrove was walking toward her. His face was serious, his steps slow and deliberate. Elena felt her stomach tighten. She did not know what to expect. An apology? An excuse? Maybe he would just pretend he did not recognize her. He stopped a few feet away and looked at her for a long moment. The noise of the room seemed to fade into the background. "Elena," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." She did not respond. She just waited. He took a deep breath. "When we let you go, I thought I was making a business decision. I told myself it was just numbers, just budget cuts, but standing here tonight, watching you play." He paused, shaking his head. "I realize I never saw you." "Not really. I never took the time to know who you were beyond that front desk." Elena felt something shift inside her. She had imagined this moment so many times. She had pictured herself telling him off, making him feel small the way he had made her feel. But now that he was standing in front of her, she did not feel anger. She just felt tired. "Thank you for saying that," she said softly. "It means more than you know." Mr. Hargrove nodded. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but he did not. He simply shook her hand and walked away. A few minutes later, she spotted Derek standing near the exit. He was alone now, his friends nowhere to be seen. When their eyes met, he quickly looked away and slipped out the door without a word. Elena watched him go. She thought she would feel satisfaction, some kind of victory, but she did not. She just felt free. Free from the weight of their opinions, free from the need to prove herself to people who had never deserved her time in the first place. The night ended late. George walked her to the door of the venue and made sure she got into a cab safely. Before she left, he handed her a small piece of paper with his phone number on it. "Call me tomorrow," he said. "I have a feeling things are about to change for you." He was right. The next morning, Elena woke up to her phone buzzing non-stop. She had dozens of missed calls and hundreds of notifications. Confused, she opened her social media and felt her jaw drop. Someone at the gala had recorded her performance. The video had been posted online late last night, and by morning, it had gone viral. Thousands of people had shared it. Comments poured in from all over the world. People called her a hidden genius, a diamond in the rough, a story of hope and resilience. Within a week, her life had completely transformed. A reporter from a local news station reached out and asked to interview her. Then a national morning show called. Then a podcast. Then another. Everyone wanted to know her story. The receptionist who got fired and mocked, only to stun the same people with her incredible talent. Music schools started contacting her. They offered scholarships, teaching positions, performance opportunities. The Chicago Symphony invited her to audition. A famous concert hall in New York asked if she would be interested in performing there. Elena could barely keep up. It was like the universe had been saving all of this for her, waiting for the right moment to open the floodgates. But through all of it, she never forgot the people who mattered most. The first thing she did with the money from her first paid performance was move her mother to a better facility. It was a beautiful place, with gardens, and kind nurses, and rooms filled with natural light. When Elena brought her there for the first time, her mother looked around with wide eyes, confused but happy. "This is nice," her mother said softly. "Is this our new home?" Elena held her hand and smiled. "It is your new home, Mama. You are going to be very happy here." Her mother looked at her for a long moment. And then, for the first time in months, a spark of recognition flickered in her eyes. "Elena," she whispered. "My little piano girl." Elena broke down and cried. She held her mother close and did not let go for a very long time. She also stayed in touch with George. He became like family to her, the father figure she had lost so many years ago. They had dinner together every Sunday, and he came to every single one of her performances, always sitting in the front row with that proud smile on his face. One evening, about a year after the gala, Elena found herself standing backstage at Carnegie Hall in New York City. It was the most famous concert venue in the world, the place where legends had played, where dreams came true. And tonight, she was the one performing. She peeked through the curtain and saw the audience filling the seats. Thousands of people, all there to hear her play. In the front row, she spotted George, dressed in a new suit he had bought just for the occasion. Next to him was an empty seat with a small bouquet of flowers on it. It was for her mother, who was too frail to travel but had sent her love through a handwritten note that Elena kept in her pocket. A stagehand tapped her on the shoulder. "5 minutes, Miss Reyes." Elena nodded. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She thought about everything that had brought her to this moment. The little girl who fell in love with the piano. The teenager who gave up her dreams to take care of her family. The woman who was fired and laughed at and made to feel like she was nothing. And now, here she was, standing on the greatest stage in the world. She thought about what George had told her that night at the community center. Life does not wait for us to be ready. It gives us moments, and we either take them or let them pass. She had taken her moment, and it had changed everything. The stagehand called her name. The lights dimmed. The audience fell silent. Elena walked out onto the stage. The spotlight hit her, warm and bright. She looked out at the sea of faces. At George, smiling in the front row. At the piano, waiting for her like an old friend. She sat down on the bench. She placed her fingers on the keys, and she played. The music filled the hall. Beautiful and powerful, and full of everything she had ever felt. It told the story of a girl who had lost everything and found it again. A story of pain and hope, of silence and sound, of falling down and getting back up. When the last note faded into the air, the audience erupted. They rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, some of them crying. Elena stood and bowed. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. She had been fired. She had been mocked. She had been invisible for so long. But now, the whole world could see her, and they would never forget her name.